Justice League was a pretty awesome show. In my opinion, it had almost no bad episodes. Were there some weaker than others? Of course, but even the lesser episodes at least had some things to offer, for the most part. This, however, was not the case for a later Season 5 episode titled Far From Home. Season 5 was overall a bit weak. It was still good, much better than Season 1, but you really start to notice at times that this show went on a season longer than the writers expected. Season 5 had some pretty strange episodes, but I wouldn't call any of them bad except for the aforementioned Far From Home. Probably the only episode of Justice League I walked away from completely unsatisfied. This is particularly strange because Far From Home was written by Paul Dini, the head writer for Batman the Animated Series, and he worked a lot on DCAU, though he wasn't very much involved in Justice League. So what happens in this episode is, it's Supergirl's 21st birthday. Apparently she's struggling with being an outsider because she spent most of her life living on a planet with far more advanced technology than here on Earth. Additionally, she doesn't like living in Superman's shadow.
I've tried to step back and let her develop into her own person. I didn't want her living in the shadow of being Superman's cousin.
This may shock you, but she's proud to be your cousin. She even changed her costume to look more like yours.
Eventually, Supergirl, Green Lantern, and Green Arrow get transported to the 31st century to help some superhero team fight a supervillain team called the Fatal Five. In the future, Supergirl meets the heroic descendant of Brainiac. They somehow fall in love despite only knowing each other for like half a day. Then Supergirl decides to stay in the future, completely disregarding every person she had ever formed any meaningful relationship with on present-day Earth. Nice. Okay. Well, first off, by this point in the series, we had already seen 2 time travel plots. Personally, I was sick of it by this point, but that doesn't necessarily make the episode bad. Let's talk about that goddamn romance. Look, I've seen Disney movies. I can accept a romance being rushed in a story. But whereas in Disney movies, we usually see the 2 leads developing some sort of chemistry with each other over the course of the film, in Justice League, there was none of that. It's like the writers knew that in Disney movies, couples barely spend much time together, but eventually find things to bond over so they fall in love. However, with Supergirl and Brainiac 5, the writers forgot to write things for them to bond over, so they are just suddenly in love with each other out of nowhere. And it seems like the writers were aware of how contrived this was, as evidenced by this line.
Admit it, genius. You're in love with her.
Ludicrous, we just met. Moreover,
I think in the comics, her and Brainiac were a couple, but an adaptation cannot be so reliant on the audience to read the source material to fill in the gaps. To be fair, there was this moment between them midway through the episode, although I don't think that's enough. Many JLU episodes would have been stronger if they were split into 2 parts like in the first 2 seasons, and Far From Home is definitely one of those episodes. Supergirl's shallow romance with Brainiac 5 is one of the reasons she decided to remain in the future. I'm aware it was not the only reason, but it definitely was one of the motivators. If this episode was supposed to be some kind of ending to Supergirl's character, it did a bad job in my opinion. She made a really impulsive, reckless, and frankly selfish decision to stay in the future. She opted to stay on a whim, completely disregarding the family, friends, and life she had developed over the past 5-ish years on Earth. Imagine how Barbara Gordon, Martha, almost forgot her name somehow, and Jonathan Kent would feel about this. Her whole arc in this episode just comes across as so forced and fake. She was given conflicts she never had before at any point in this continuity. So she apparently doesn't want to live in Superman's shadow, and wants to carve out her own unique identity. Okay, but if she wants to be more unique and stand out, why did she redesign her costume to look more like Superman's? She also apparently feels like an outsider because she is not a fan of present-day technology on Earth. Again, a conflict she never really had before. To sum up, her whole journey and arc in this episode just felt so poorly handled. Moreover, it sucked not seeing Supergirl in the finale, considering how important her character was throughout the whole show. In JLU, she got even more screen time than some of the original members. She should have been fighting parademons and been in the final shot of the series like all the other heroes. On an unrelated note, I remember reading somewhere that if Cartoon Network had renewed this show for another season, Bruce Timm and company were planning on revolving the entire season around time travel. As much as I like this series, maybe it's a good thing it got cancelled when it did. Also, I hear they made a new JL movie where the Fatal Five are the villains. I'm yet to see it, so I can't comment on it. But you can comment on this video about your thoughts on this episode or whatever episode you consider to be the worst of the series. And yes, I do consider Justice League and Justice League Unlimited to be one show.